Welcome. It's Lisa Norell with the Mindful Marketer Livestream, and today is August 20th. Now, we welcome all of you from across the globe, the hundreds of you who registered to be with us today. Now, you might think that the pandemic is the true cause of so many of us focusing on short-term issues and firefighting and being reactionary. But I have news for you. This challenge has been around for the years I've been advising chief marketing officers and CEOs. This problem has persisted and it only has been exacerbated by the pandemic. You know, in private, my CMOs will tell me, I just don't make time to design the future. I'm too busy handling the problems I inherited, or I'm too busy checking my inbox and going on the Slack channel and handling the day-to-day challenges or questions that pop up. Well, now is the time for us to talk about how we can play the long game and tackle the tough questions of what does it mean to play the long game? And how do we buck the trend in our society of focusing on short-term gains and short-term investment returns? We need to live in both worlds. And that's why I'm very excited today to be talking with Dorie Clark. Now, I could spend a long time talking about my friendship with Dorie and all of her great accomplishments, but I've narrowed it down to 10 descriptors: friend, prodigy, author, stand-up comedian, Broadway investor, e-learning pioneer, avid New York fan and resident, activist, big thinker, and last but not least, a fellow cat lover and cat mom. So without further ado, I want you to know that this book, Dorie's new book, is very special. I think it's her best book yet to date, and we're very pleased to have her with us today on the Mindful Marketer Livestream. Good afternoon, Dorie.
Lisa, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, well, you know, being fellow cat moms, it's important that we stay connected and share all of our great little stories. Tell us about your two brothers, the two little brothers.
Absolutely. This is always the best question possible, because who doesn't want to talk about cats? I have two little guys that I adopted 5 years ago, Heath and Phil. Phil is a white and black cat that really, really wants to be famous. He loves to Zoom bomb webinars and just appreciates all the adoration. And Heath is a really sweet little loving cat with perhaps some anxiety issues, and he prefers a dark room. So they're a great team.
Oh my gosh, a little yin and yang.
Absolutely.
Dynamics there. You know, I bring that up because our pets are personal, right? I mean, we love them so much, and they really have helped us through these difficult pandemic moments of isolation, which helps me transition to our discussion today about the book, The Long Game. I've read all your books. You and I have been following each other for a long time and helped each other in so many ways. But to me, this book for you was much more personal than your other books. Tell us what inspired you to tell more of your own personal stories in this book, Dorie.
Well, you're exactly right, Lisa. And one of the reasons that in The Long Game, it is a little bit more personal. Actually, when I first started writing books, my first one was Reinventing You that came out now 8 years ago. I had trained as a journalist, and something that I really wasn't even aware of, it was just, so implicit, it was a blind spot, was that as a journalist, you are trained not to put yourself in the story. You are the least interesting part of the story. You need to write about the things outside yourself. It's considered kind of, amateurish or self-aggrandizing to be writing about yourself. And so I wrote Reinventing You like a journalist would. And I actually had my editor come back to me and say, basically, well, where are you in this? You have some relationship to reinvention. Why don't you include yourself? And I was like, oh, that's a thing? You want me to do that? And then I realized, from the feedback that I got from readers, like, oh, that's actually the part that people like best. So, which was just bonkers to me. And so I really had to unlearn that over the course of my various books, and come to understand that people really did want to hear your own journey. And so I think finally have become more comfortable doing that and talking about that. So I foregrounded it in some ways in the long game, but that was really a process.
I loved it. It just helped me see things about you that I already knew, because, we've had a lot of nice conversations and dinners, and shared a couple glasses of adult beverages over the years. But that really meant a lot to me to say, oh my gosh, yeah, she finally starts to connect all of these disparate dots and shows us the richness of your life. It's so true. Yes. Welcome, Annette. Annette from San Diego, and we have Todd from New York, and Kelly from Washington, D.C. Kelly, happy Friday. Cheryl from Minneapolis in the United States. Oh my goodness, we have people and many joining from around the world. So that's super fun. And I'd like to ask you too, speaking of your life, talk to us about at what stage of your life, what was that life moment where you said, I got to do something different for the long game, for the long haul, because where I'm at isn't necessarily going to get me there?
Yeah, well, I think that there are probably multiple inflection points for many people. And I'd be curious, of course, Lisa, to hear about yours as well. But for me, one thing that I can really point to when it comes specifically to the evolution of my business is that there came a certain point where I realized, and this is maybe 2010, 2011, that I was not going to be able to grow my business unless I really did something dramatically different. Because I think a realization that a lot of new entrepreneurs and small business people kind of never, they either never reach it or they don't know what to do about it, which is like everybody else. I mean, I think every business owner starts out with the people that they know, and then the people that they know refer them to the other people that they know. That's fantastic. But the people that I knew didn't have a lot of money. And that was actually a really big problem over time. I'm like, all right, this is great. But if I don't want to literally kill myself, I need to level up. I was working with lovely people and nice people, but I wanted to be playing at a bigger level and making more money and working for organizations that were just operating on a broader scale. And I knew that there was just literally no way that I could continue doing that through referrals, because people know people like themselves. And I realized I had to just sort of inject something different. I had to kind of put a screw in the works to turn it into something different. And so that is why I really began to double down on my efforts in writing. And, this is a process that I talk about a lot in my various books, especially my book, Stand Out. I made a very conscious decision around 2011 that I would actually start cutting back on the work that I was doing. I would weed out lower paying clients and redirect my time and effort to writing and to specifically kind of growing my platform. And it actually meant that for a period of 3 years, my income decreased, by 6 figures. I was making quite a bit less money because I was allocating so much time to platform building, but I was doing it with a strategic intention. And that intention was platform building, which I wagered, I didn't know it really was a bet, but I wagered that would help me over the long term be able to grow my business and raise my fees in a way that would make it worth it. And fortunately, that did happen. But for like a 3-year period, it's an intense bet to make.
Oh, it definitely is an intense bet. I recently did something very similar. I have a great marketing coach, and of course have worked with some of the legends like Alan Weiss. And of course, we get to participate regularly in the 100 Coaches community, where there are some prolific authors and experts and consultants. But I recently did something very similar as I released one of the offerings that I had because the margins were really low and we're not reaping recurring dividends. And I said, I'm going to double down on what we can do with CMOs and my online learning and my live streams. And it created a double-digit hit, an increase in my revenues right away. So
yeah,
it's not easy.
It does really take a leap of faith to do it, but all of these things are calculated bets. You just say, all right, I need to do something different. Let's experiment. Let's put out a hypothesis and see how it goes. So props to you for doing that, Lisa.
Yes. Well, and it also takes, and some advice for all of you watching, it's not easy to do this. The one thing that gave me the courage to do it is I know what kind of and what level of risk I'm willing to take. And I create both mental reserves and financial reserves before I do that. And I think that every one of us needs to define what is prudent risk to us. And for me, it's 12 months of cash. That's my number. So and everyone's got to pick their number, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm right there with you. Being self-employed, I think that it's actually really important to disproportionately prioritize having a stash of liquid assets, because essentially that means that you are that you are not going to fall prey to the vicissitudes of timing, right? I mean, there's a lot of risk that you can withstand if you have cash in the bank, because you never have to fold. You never have to get desperate. You can wait for the market to turn, however we're defining the market. And there's a lot of power in that.
Yes, it is. And I learned this actually a few years ago and said, that's going to be my rock. That's going to keep me from making stupid decisions. It's been pretty good so far. We actually have so many questions that have been coming in, Dorie. We're not going to be able to cover all of them. So on the other hand, I want everyone to post your questions, because we will go back to the LinkedIn live stream when it's ready and we will answer your questions. So fear not, just keep posting your questions. I also have a question that came in from a client, Sarah Briegel, who's joining us from Massachusetts, Dorie. Let's see what she has to ask. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Lisa. Hi, Dorie. Thank you for hosting today's session. It's an honor and a privilege to hear this dialogue. So, Dorie, question for you. I work for a company called Linkage. We help leaders become better people managers. And right now, we're hearing and seeing a lot of leaders struggle with how do we get through this time of uncertainty, obviously with COVID and now with the Delta variant being a very real reality. How do you help people leaders prioritize this long-term thinking in a world where we are faced with uncertainty and constant change due to COVID?
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Sarah. That's obviously the kind of big picture question that's on everybody's mind these days, right? And I was in the thick of it because as literally the day that I got the acceptance for my book from Harvard Business Review Press, it was February 28th, 2020. Literally the next morning, the first COVID case was revealed in New York, March 1st. And within 2 weeks, pretty much the entire nation was shut down. So things moved fast. And that was a time, over that first year, let's say, of COVID, when I feel like the scales were tipped in very far in the opposite direction of nimbleness, agility, responsiveness. And we have to do that sometimes, right? That those are undoubtedly important skills and important things that we need to be able to do, no question. But also, what I am very committed to, and part of why I at least like to think that long-term thinking in the long game is still relevant at the end of this, is you also similarly can't do responsiveness and reactivity and agility all the time. That can't be your only trick, because if that's our only trick, it means we don't have an agenda of our own. And I am done with COVID bossing me around. COVID is not going to be the boss of me anymore. I know that, yeah, that's right. Take that, COVID. If you're watching, take that. And so, yeah, I mean, do we have to be nimble and responsive? Yes. I mean, I'm getting notices, I was going to be speaking at a couple of conferences this fall. Now it's like, I don't know, like maybe it's virtual. Like there's things that we might have to pivot. There's things we might have to change, and we get that. But we also, if we're going to ever take back control so that we are able to call our pitch and move in the right direction, we have to nonetheless be long-term thinkers. Now, what does that mean? Part of the reason that I actually like really long-term thinking, like let's call it 10 plus years, this is my favorite part. Here's my secret. When you are planning for the long term, let's say 10 plus years, you don't have to know how you're going to do it. Amazing. We get so like caught up about like, oh my God, well, how are you going to do the plan? Blah, 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 blah. It's 10 years away. You don't need to know. You just need to know the next thing. And you keep doing the next thing. You'll figure it out. I promise you, when you're 5 years in, you're going to know a lot more about how you're going to achieve that 10-year plan. So it's both and I love that question. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thanks, Dorie.
It's great to see you, Sarah. Thanks for being
Likewise.
here.
Thanks for.
And we also had Dr. Chris join us in our chat room on LinkedIn, by the way. And he has a question on several people's minds. In a world of knee-jerk fear these past 2 years, the long game has been the key to keeping motivated and pushing forward. Chris, you mentioned in the live stream chat room earlier, though, that you're concerned about balance. How do you balance doing things that will pay off over 10 years while also making sure you can pay the bills?
Yes, that's a big one too, obviously. And my first piece, I mean, some of this is really just kind of back to brass tacks, right? Lisa mentioned earlier that she's an advocate of keeping a large cash reserve. And I think for all of us, I have friends, I have clients who are nascent entrepreneurs, and certainly this applies if you're working inside a corporation as well. But there's phases of things that you need to think about, right? So I mean, job one, if we're talking about like the Maslow hierarchy of needs, is like get your cash reserve, get your emergency cash reserve before you do anything, right? Just have that so that if disaster strikes, God forbid, you are going to be okay. That's the first thing. But beyond that, you can begin to start thinking. And I'll say there's a couple of things. In a very tactical sense, I am a huge fan of keeping expenses down as much as we humanly can. I'll tell you, when I started my business, when I became an entrepreneur, this is now 15 years ago, I was wanting to buy a condo, and I did. And I deliberately bought this condo. I could have stretched, but I deliberately bought a condo it was in the town that I wanted to be in, but it was the cheapest neighborhood in the town that I wanted to be in. Literally a few years later, biggest heroin bust in the city's history happened across the street from my house. I'm like, hey, there we go. But I knew that no matter what, no matter how long it took me to get this business off the ground, I would be able to pay the mortgage, and I was not going to have to sweat. And I got to tell you, the existential peace that I found because of that is really profound. You don't ever want to have to do something because of money. And so if you keep your expenses down, it's really powerful. Also, the other reaction is, if there are gangs around you, just FYI, if you relocate to a gang neighborhood, actually, they don't really care. Who they care about is other gangs. But as long as you're not in the other gang, mostly they're like, okay, whoever, no big deal. So it's actually super safe as long as you were not in the other gang. So it worked great.
Yes. And you also might just avoid joining any gangs altogether, unless they are of sterling quality, like the Marshall Goldsmith 100 Coaches Gang.
That's right. And as you can see from Lisa, the gang color is red. She is not a blood. That is MG 100 right there.
I know, I'm not a blood. I just decided today to wear bright colors because we are on day 4 of rain here in Northern Virginia. So I thought brightness is great. So, and it also, it complements the color of your book cover just perfectly. So
yes,
why
I
not?
love that. I love that.
And by the way, stay on, everyone, because we will be sharing some special links at the end where you can download some very outstanding gifts from Dorie for the long game. And your assessment's really amazing and rock solid. Hey, wait a second. We've got Beth from Leesburg, Virginia joining us as well. And she happens to be my neighbor. Now, neither Beth nor I are gang members in Leesburg, Virginia. So I thought I would clarify that first. So we'd like to now bring on another guest who has a question for you, Dorie, and for me. And let's welcome Aviva. And Aviva's on mute.
Apologies. Hi, everybody. How are you today?
Hey, Aviva.
Hey, good to see you. So thanks so much for having me on the show. My name is Aviva Leggett. I'm the author of Get Real and Get In with St. Martin's Press, which I was fortunate enough to interview Dorie for. Check it out. It's about college admissions. And I wanted to ask a question. This topic is interesting to me because my industry is very much changing. You know, the college admissions landscape has really become a lot more competitive. You know, the schools that people thought they could get into, really, they don't stand a chance at. And so, you know, a lot of people in my field, myself included, are thinking about, well, how do we pivot or position ourselves right in the short term? And so in that sort of momentum where you're trying to change and change and change, what does it look like to, you know, what does that 10-year goal look like at this point for someone like me who's in an industry that's very much in upheaval and in change right now?
I think that's such a great question, such an astute question, Aviva, because it's true. Certainly college admissions is a prime example, but there are lots of industries where there are dramatic changes going on. And so a logical question is, how do you even come up with a 10-year plan when the world could be so different, the landscapes could be so different? We don't even know what to plan for. And so I will say that so first of all, I think that if you have some kind of a vision, even if it seems kind of, you know, bold and extreme, that one point that I make in the long game is that a lot of people actually just temper their expectations or their goals way too much. You know, they're sort of like, oh, maybe I can be a VP. And it's like, you know what? If it's your 10-year goal, make it the CEO. Why not? Because again, you don't have to know how to get there. And so if you have a world domination goal for 10 years, I would say put it on there. That's fantastic. Like, we can go for it. But here's the key that I would say. So in college admissions in particular, this is very much echoing a lot of trends that we're seeing in a lot of industries, which is that the trend over time to a kind of winner take all is really taking place here. So we know that, you know, there's probably always going to be community colleges. There's probably always going to be Ivy League and like elite colleges, and the middle is going to get sucked out. A lot of them are going to go out of business. That actually makes you, as a college admissions expert, that much more valuable, because it becomes that much more valuable to be going to Harvard and not to the community college. And so the need for your services is going to be huge. Now, when I say I mean the services of a college admissions person. But the same thing that's happening in higher ed overall is happening in the world of college admissions experts, because they want to know, like, if people are really going to shell out a lot of money, they want to know they're talking to the best. And so this is where social proof becomes so huge. So I think for a lot of people, if you don't know what your 10-year goal is, let me suggest one for you. Become the most famous person in your industry. That is a darn good 10-year goal. And so accruing as much social proof as possible is a fantastic thing to do. And Aviva, I know you are well on your path. You've written a book from a prestigious commercial publisher, St. Martin's Press. You write for Forbes. You've been quoted in a lot of national publications. Those are the exact right moves and the things you need to do. You need third-party validation of things that people have heard of, media outlets, et cetera, that people have heard of, saying this lady's legit. And when we accrue enough of that, that means that as the market gets cleared out, you become one of the people who are the disproportionate 80-20 winners. And that's what I want for you. And that's what I want for everybody on this call.
Amen.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Aviva.
I feel like we need to send you one of those minister robes. I know, you've studied theology extensively in your life, and but there is a certain religiosity to what you're saying. And I am also super religious about never stopping to create valuable content, insights, and connections. What makes me the saddest, Dorie, is when I run across amazing thought leaders. And, thank you, Aviva, for being one of the thought leaders here today, who say to me, and I'm not making this up, Lisa, I don't know about this live streaming thing. I don't know about this podcasting thing. I did 6 podcasts. Yeah, didn't do much for me. I don't do it anymore. And I really get sad when I hear that. And I hear that from big organizations, and I hear it from solopreneurs. So what's your perspective on that?
Well, I feel sad. So let's parse sad, because I feel sad as well, like for them, but a part of me feels happy, Lisa. And it feels happy because it's about what I want to see rewarded is the people who are willing to do the work. And so it's the people who are pushing on and who are saying, you know what, I did 6 episodes. I'm not seeing any traction. I'm not seeing any pickup. I'm going to keep going. Those are the people that I want the universe to be rewarding. I don't want people who, with this short-term mentality to be like, oh, thriving and succeeding, right? I mean, I'm just like, what can I say? I'm too Calvinist for that. Whatevs, Like, I want the hard work to be rewarded. And so when somebody says, oh, I tried it, and 2 times later they give up, I'm like, okay, good, because it clears the path for the people who are willing to persevere. And those are the people that I admire. And to your point, this is super common in my book, Entrepreneurial You. I actually quote a super interesting longitudinal study that was done over a 10-year period by a guy named Josh Marshall, who's a researcher, and he studied all the podcasts in the iTunes store. And he discovered that the average podcast lasted only 12 episodes and 6 months. So basically 2 episodes a month for 6 months before it was shut down. That was the average. And it's like, oh my God. So if you keep pushing past it, which I know you have, you're close to 50 episodes with this, which is amazing. That's really the behavior where you're able to just push and keep going. And over time, you are going to outlast a vast majority. I mean, do you need to be good? Yeah, of course you need to be good. But also, you get better over time. And with that time and that practice and that just sort of momentum that comes with keeping on doing things, you really can achieve big success, which I think in many ways is the entire premise of the long game. So I'm right there with you.
Yes, I love what you said on page 180 of your book when you said, quote, you have to be excellent and you have to be at bats. I mean, you need at bats. So every week, whether I like it or not, what do? I reach out to chief marketing officers. I follow up with chief marketing officers. I check in with them on LinkedIn chats. I send good content that is, tied directly to some of the business imperatives that they're facing at that moment. I don't stop. And persistence pays off. There's no downside. Absolutely no downside. So I just keep on going. Yes, Lori is with us as well from New Hampshire, rewarding the hard work. Hi, Sue. I feel like we should call this the Mindful Marketer Livestream New England edition, because we have a lot of people from New England joining us today. So shout out to my birthplace. I want to talk to you about your mentors and supporters who help you keep going. Could you share with us a couple of your mentors who play the long game brilliantly?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that, there's a lot of great people that I learned from. I mean, one, just to cite a common example we have as you saw, Lisa, because I know you've read The Long Game. Someone that I profile in the book is our friend Marshall Goldsmith. And something that I really love about him and his approach. So there's a concept that I talk about in the long game called thinking in waves. And the basic premise of this is about career waves. And a point that I make is that I feel like where a lot of people, a lot of good, smart, talented people go wrong in their careers is that, sometimes they come to me and they're like, I'm working so hard and I'm doing the things and it's not working. Why is it not working? And so you dig into it a little bit, and what you discover is that they just keep doing the same thing. And the trick in careers, that whole thing about careers, is that you have to do different things and you have to shift sometimes. You can't just keep doing the same thing. You have to make transitions and think in waves, and different waves are appropriate at different times. And so in Marshall's case, I talk about, when you get to the point of success that he's at, right? He's in his early 70s. He's written extremely popular books. He's, by now very successful, very wealthy. He's sort of reached the place where a lot of people would take their foot off the gas and just say, all right, now I'll bask. And, on one hand, you can understand that. And on the other hand, as Marshall says, you really can't go from being CEO one day to eating chicken salad sandwich at the club the next day and be happy about that. Like it's just, if that's the rest of your life and that's never going to change, that's a little depressing. And so he, I think, really is a great exemplar of the fact that when you're in the reaping phase, reap, enjoy it, but that can't be your whole life. And you need to reshift back into the first stage, quote unquote, which is the learning phase and learning about something different. And Marshall has done that by creating his 100 Coaches program, where he's passing on his knowledge and creating a kind of learning community. And he learns through that process as well. And I think that that's a great way to keep in mind, and a way for all of us to keep ourselves fresh, is to recognize you have to keep changing your tactics. You have to keep moving forward, and you can't just, sit there in one mode and, throw your fist at the sky.
Yes. And please do not rest on your laurels of what you accomplished 10 years ago. I remember in my previous life, before I started my business 20 years ago, I was part of a group of sales training faculty members. And we were all in Mexico City, Dorie, and we were training IBM. And one of the instructors was a very seasoned former executive from Digital Equipment Corporation. May they rest in peace. And he spent the whole time when he was teaching the concepts behind this sales methodology, talking about the good old days. Oh, wait, 20 years ago when I worked at Digital Equipment, and the examples were just not relevant anymore. And what Marshall does so brilliantly, and what you do so brilliantly, is you share examples that are contemporary. And you share examples that come out of nowhere, like when you chipped your tooth or when you learned stand-up comedy. And you would say, wait a minute, stand-up comedy? What's that got to do with becoming a thought leader and building a successful business? A lot. So that's what I love about you, is you just always reinventing and trying. Something else quickly I want to talk about that I should also talk about with my clients is this whole concept of minimum viable product and this mindset of experimentation. So that's also been very helpful for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, minimum viable product is a concept that folks in Silicon Valley have been talking about for a long time. It's sort of a key component of the so-called lean startup methodology, which was popularized about a decade ago by Steve Blank and by Eric Ries in his book, The Lean Startup. But one of the points that I try to make in the long game is that there are a lot of interesting business techniques that many of us, in fact, may apply in our professional lives, but we should be applying them in our personal life as well. These are really useful concepts. And the thing that I like about, a minimum viable product, I mean, the basic way to describe it is don't spend like millions of hours making this perfect, pretty, amazing thing before finding out, does anybody want it in the first place? And that's good advice. And it's also good advice for us in our own lives to understand that it's okay to test little things. Like if you're, for instance, thinking about making a career switch, I mean, my God, don't just like quit your job and plunge into something. That's not really a good idea. That sounds a little overly risky to me. Instead, have the informational interviews, take a week off and job shadow someone, learn something, do an internship, try something nights and weekends, test it out to make sure if you actually do like it, test it out to make sure people actually want the thing that you want to be providing them. And then when you have that data, it's not so risky. In fact, it may not even be risky at all because you have enough data to know with some degree of certainty whether something is going to work or not. And it doesn't have to be a roll of the dice.
Absolutely not. That's something that even some of my larger corporate clients struggle with. It can especially be challenging if you many of you here work for organizations where they have a long history of tradition of how they do business, and their product launches can take 2 to 3 years. Well, I don't know about you, Dorie, but not too many competitive organizations now can afford to spend 3 years testing out an idea. So it's got to be quick and find that subset of customers or prospects where you can see what the receptivity is to those particular ideas. We have time for one more question coming in from a LinkedIn user. To keep going is a great piece of advice. How do you prevent burnout when you are testing and learning and planting so many seeds?
Yeah, and of course, this is crucial. Keeping going, you need to do it. But to the point about career waves and thinking in waves, one other aspect of this is that, the answer to marathon or sprint is both, but we have to alternate, right? There are times, and in fact, I am keenly aware of this right now because I am in the middle of a book launch for The Long Game. The Long Game is coming out September 21st. So mark your calendars. It is available for pre-sale now if you are excited about that. But for the next 6 weeks, I'm a maniac. I'm doing like all these interviews, writing all these things. It is pretty relentless. I also realize, number one, this is what I need to do. This is what I need to do at this time in order to make the launch successful. I do not want to have the launch and then at the end of it be like, gosh, I guess I should have worked a little harder. Like, right? Nobody wants to regret something. So I have to do that, even if it's a little miserable. However, I also am not going to, would it be optimal for sales of the book for me to market like a maniac for the rest of my life? I mean, yes, I'd probably sell more books if I did that. I also can't sustain it. And so I am making choices about how to throttle up and how to throttle down. And so once the launch period is over, I am not going to stop promoting the book. That would be a mistake, but I am going to ratchet it down so that it becomes manageable. And I'm going to continue that through the end of the year. And starting in January and February, I'm actually planning to take 2 months of, I'll call it a quasi sabbatical, where I'm not eliminating all my professional activities, but I am probably eliminating 90% of them so that I can just take a break, because these have been a very, very busy last couple of years. COVID, to the point of the conversation with Aviva, a lot of things have become wildly unequal just in terms of these kind of power law properties. And so some people, unfortunately during COVID, they lost their job, they lost all their work. Other people, and I would be in this category, and I do feel grateful. It's a good problem to have, but I got way too much work. And so it's like none of the work, all of the work. And so it's been a crazy 2 years. And so I am therefore going to turn the dial down dramatically for a couple of months to reset and then, get it back to a more normal pace. So I think when we talk about how to avoid burnout, it's understanding that we will need to learn to toggle between the sprint mode and the marathon mode.
Definitely. And kudos to you. You take most Fridays off. I take most Fridays off and only focus on my live stream. I don't do meetings. I don't fill it up. And it just does help restore my energy and get me ready for the following week. So we're wrapping up, Dorie. I wish we had more time together, but we're going to have you back for sure, and continue to celebrate your success and the contribution you're making to the world, because you are such a special person in my life, and you teach us and model what it means to truly be a mindful marketer.
Lisa, thank you so much. It's so great to be here and have the chance to talk with you and your wonderful audience. And I'll just mention for folks that are interested in learning more about strategic thinking and long-term planning, I have a free resource that if in case it might be of interest. It is the long game self-assessment, the strategic thinking self-assessment. And anyone who'd like can get it for free at dorieclark.com/thelonggame.
Yes, and we put it up there as a banner so people can watch the live stream replay, and make sure you get that assessment and order her book. Pre-order it. It's on Amazon and other fine booksellers. Dorie, happy weekend. Best to you and your cats, and we will see you again soon.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Thanks, everyone.
Well, folks, we are wrapping it up today, and I'm going to make sure we put in the show notes the links that we've shared today. This also will be broadcast as a podcast. The Mindful Marketer podcast is coming out very soon, so I'm very thrilled about that. So as we move forward, I promised you that we would announce who the winners are for the Dorie Clark Long Game book. We are going to be sending copies to 2 lucky winners. Those lucky winners are, drumroll, Stephen Kaplan. The 2 lucky winners are Lori Richardson of New Hampshire and Chris Cornthwaite. Chris Cornthwaite, congratulations. Please contact me privately and we will send you a book from Dorie directly. So again, wonderful to see you all here today. Don't leave yet. I've got news about the next September shows. Our next Mindful Marketer live streams are happening September 10th and September 17th. On September 10th, we welcome the one and only Alan Weiss, who's been my mentor for well over 15 years and is a prophetic author known as the rock star of consulting and a person who's going to talk about why your marketing legacy is now. Talking about the long game. Boy, we're going to continue this discussion. So make sure you mark your calendars for September 10th and September 17th, where we will be welcoming Todd Churches from New York to talk about visual leadership. Until then, post your questions in the chat. We will be answering your questions going forward. Follow me and make it a mindful and enjoyable weekend.